how many loans are defaulting or in foreclosure. It is huge. It may have topped out and maybe it's beginning to slide down, but even if it slides down, it is still huge. So it is, again, flushing through the system of all those bad loans made in 2005, 2006, 2007, because recently originated mortgages are performing outstandingly. And this is also the discussion about the shadow inventory, where your loans are defaulting, and surely this distressed mortgages and distressed homes will come onto the market, maybe not now, but 6 months from now or 1 year from now. One area of shadow inventory that is less discussed is on the new home shadow inventory. Any given month, any given normal year, there's always new home construction being built and comes onto the market. But right now, the newly constructed inventory is at 40-year lows. So this has helped mitigate some of the existing inventory that is under distress and the shadow inventory. But this is rarely discussed in the media, which is that there is in essence, non-existent shadow inventory of new homes coming onto the market. And the reason why there is a very few new homes on the market is the builders are not building. And builders last year, they did not want to build to compete with foreclosed home. But this year, some of the builders are saying, I found a niche. I see a buyer who could buy my home. But the builders go to the banks and say, I want a construction mortgage. And they say, forget about it. We're not lending anything that doesn't have government backing. And construction loans do not have government backing. We will not lend it to you. So the builders who want to build are being constrained by the credit non-availability. Regarding Boulder housing starts, so about 1,000 anticipated this year. Last year was about 500. So this will be the greater Boulder. I'm not sure how they exactly define it, county or the metropolitan area. So very, very suppressed level in the housing starts, which means also that once the demand comes around, all the inventory quickly get absorbed, and the demand still comes around, then you have a housing shortage. And if the housing shortage, then it will pressure prices to rise, which is good for property owners, but not good for people who want to buy a home or people who are engaged in the business of helping people buy a home. So the housing shortage is not necessarily a good news. During the bubble years, housing shortage was no problem because anybody can get any kind of loans, but now we are back to normal lending. We're overly stringent, but even under normal lending criteria, if the price is high, then people will be priced out, and they will be unable to obtain a loan. So housing shortage is not a good news for buyers and people in the business. It is good news for property existing owners when they get some price appreciation. Greater Denver area, again, sort of see similar trend. Fort Collins, very similar. So the question is about return to normalcy. Each of this point I'm going to quickly go over. Home sales, this is nationwide. One sees that during the bubble years, additional sales, and those are speculative investor sales, and also people who may not have necessarily qualify under normal lending criteria, they enter the market. So too much sales, but now come back down, and it matches up with a long-term trend line, back to normal. Home sales in relation to the jobs are so pretty much back to normal. National median home price, show this chart to an elementary school student, and they can easily get it. That hump was an artificial, but today it looks like it's back to normal. Mentally, they will put a ruler through it, and they say things appear back to normal. Home price in relation to the income, it is slightly below normal. During the bubble years, too high, but now it is slightly below normal, meaning some overcorrection in the marketplace. Home price in relation to the construction cost, construction cost is more expensive than the home values. In other words, you have the bricks, copper, and everything, and you try to build exactly the same home as the ones that you have, it will be more expensive than the one that is already built and ready for you. So all indication is that bubble has been removed from the marketplace, is back to normal, but we will not have back to normal if the consumers remain on the sidelines. And the home value can become bubble-ish, and it can also overcorrect downward. But it is back to normal. Hopefully the buyers can come back to the market, job creation, compelling affordability conditions, some loosening in the credit hopefully will do the trick in terms of trying to help balance the market. Mortgage interest deduction is on the table because they're saying, well, mortgage interest deduction is also part of the reason why we had the housing market bubble. Mortgage interest deduction has been in place since the introduction of the U.S. income tax code 100 years ago. For 100 years, it did not cause a bubble. How is it possible something that has been in place to say that is the source of the recent bubble? Anything that has been in place consistently, one cannot say that is the source. One has to point towards what was new during this decade that caused the housing market bubble. And it's really about the credit market bubble. The financial wizards in Wall Street came up with all this fancy product, tranches, collateralized debt obligations, AAA ratings on subprime mortgages. No one understood. So it was the credit market bubble that really led to the housing market bubble. So it's about assuring that we don't have another round of credit market bubble. It's not about mortgage interest deduction. It's not about FHA programs, but it's really about that credit market bubble not reoccurring again. So this shows the credit market bubble. And in our view, we will be fighting hard to assure that mortgage interest deduction is protected, because without that, we anticipate about 15% decline in home values. So it's not only for people who are doing the mortgage interest deduction. Even if your home is free and clear, if this is taken away, there's a 15% hit on the home values. FHA never require a single dime of taxpayers' money. Another thing that Commissioner Dave Stevens will be saying to the Congress today is to say, recently they underwent stress tests. Stress test means, can you handle extreme economic difficulty of job losses, price declines? Do you have enough money to withstand that? And the answer is, FHA is saying today, yes. We had the consultants do that stress test, and we came out positive, meaning that we will not require a single dime of taxpayers' money. Fannie and Freddie is a different story. They're getting taxpayers' money. In fact, Fannie and Freddie, this is more of my opinion, is that 40 years ago, 30 years ago, when people took out a mortgage, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Community Bank, they took out a mortgage. No one would have known who Fannie and Freddie were, because they play work in the background. They purchase mortgage from Wells Fargo and Bank of America. Their job was essentially, they have implied government backing, they can borrow money cheaply as a result, and they are passing on their low borrowing costs over to the consumers. And that was it. Very, very simple business model. But somehow, in the 1990s, they somehow believe that they are not backed by the government, even though they are implicitly backed by the government, that they are purely private and they can gamble on the housing market. In other words, they created this huge investment portfolio, or hedge fund. Hedge fund turns out, well, huge profit and bonus payments for Fannie and Freddie and the shareholders and the management involved, employees. Hedge fund collapses, any private company would lose everything. Fannie and Freddie, well, what do you know? That implied government guarantee is actually explicit government guarantee. So taxpayers are on the hook. So you have a situation, hedge fund does well, Fannie and Freddie wins, hedge fund collapses, taxpayers are on the hook. We cannot have this system. To be fair, I will also say Fannie and Freddie were very resistant to some of the mandates that was imposed by Congress on them, which says that you had to buy a certain percentage of mortgages in very low income neighborhoods. And they have to meet that requirement. So they have to chase some of the mortgages that were not of shaky quality and put it under them. So Congress also needs to be mindful of assuring that we want to have successful home ownership and not any home ownership, because home ownership with foreclosure, that's not a success. So we want to have a sustainable home ownership. One looks at Habitat for Humanity, for example, when people who would not be a homeowner through the normal channel and you see the smiles and joys in it, that's great. I mean, we want to have more opportunity for people to become homeowners, but we want a successful home ownership, not any home ownership. So I think there will be fundamental reform, restructuring of Fannie and Freddie. But one thing that NAR would be asking and advocating is that the new system will continue to require government backing, because without government backing, purely private model will mean something like the construction loans. Sometimes it's available, sometimes it is not. It will be just like jumbo mortgages. Sometimes it's available, sometimes not. but we want the middle-class Americans who are credit-worthy, willing to stay within their budget. If they want to buy a home, it should be available at all times. And only way that can happen is to have the government guarantee. But we don't want to have that mistakes of the Fannie and Freddie returning to the marketplace. This is a chart that you may want to show to your clients. This is the median family net worth between renters and homeowners over time. 2007 is the actual data collection from the Federal Reserve. 2010 is NAR estimate after the crash in the housing market bubble. Even with the decline, it clearly shows that homeowners are much better off if they're, again, financially able in building wealth over time. As Brad mentioned, the normal path, the old-fashioned way was you have a home, you have a shelter, you raise a family, and before you know it, you have paid down the mortgage, and home values appreciate 3% a year, and before you know it, prices rise, mortgage debt fall, that's your equity. That's the old-fashioned way, and I think we will be returning to that old-fashioned way of obtaining net worth. So consumers who are hesitant on the fence show this, particularly in light of the fact that home values are now at justifiable levels. Affordability conditions, people who are buying home in 2005 versus today, what would be their monthly mortgage payment to buy a typical home in their local market? So one see a drastic difference now versus then. And this saving is not a one-time saving. It's a constant month after month after month constant savings. So one can also run some similar figure for the Boulder area, and one will see that it is like a very compelling reason for people to consider buying a home for people who are financially able. Thomas Honig, who is dissenting on the Federal Reserve, the reason why he is dissenting is the following chart, and I don't know whether or not this scenario will pan out. First, let's look at the data. And let's check the time. How much time? I want to assure that you will have chance for question and answer. 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes. Consumer price is non-existent, but the producer prices are heating up, what the producers are paying. And also, commodity prices are very high, gold prices are record high, implying that there could be some pipeline inflationary pressure building, and if the consumer prices begin to rise, then it's going to be a problem for home buyers, because home buyers' mortgage rate will be much higher. It will not be 5%. Mortgage rate could be 7%, 8% if the consumer prices get out of line. So it's a possibility that if there's an inflation, there will be winners and losers. The winners will be people with tangible assets, gold, real estate, but the losers will be people who want to obtain those tangible assets. So the people, buyers, and people who are involved in the business of helping in that transaction. So the current CPI inflation is very low because of low housing rent, but it's beginning to turn upwards. And I'm not sure what the rental condition here is in Boulder market, but I anticipate that college towns will do well. Why? I said that in Fort Collins, I will say here, and I will say in other college towns. You look at the age demographics, people who are 12 years old, 11 years old, and how many will become at the age of educated age, college level age group 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and all indication shows that there will be more and more people entering college, meaning that there will be greater number of housing demand in the college town areas. In some areas, they are looking for rental homes, so there will be steady stream of rental income that you can generate. People who want to buy a home, given that many college students, it takes 6 or 7 years to graduate, why not buy a home? So I think the college town is a much better position in the recovery. Home ownership rate topped out, coming back. Let me see, commercial, I will just skip through it because awful news, awful news, awful news. They don't have Fannie and Freddie backing the loan, so they cannot get any mortgages as a result. Again, that's what would happen if there's no government guarantee. You cannot get mortgages anywhere. And my outlook is a modest expansion, 1.5 million job creation. Again, that's a slow pace. You want to see 3 or 4 million job creation. Regarding interest rates, I think the low point on mortgage rate has already occurred. Mortgage rate will begin to inch higher. Home values from now, maybe no meaningful change. I will just go with the realtor survey. Realtors are saying there will be no change in home values. Home sales, post-tax credit, slow recovery, but it will depend upon the job market conditions. And regarding the alternative possibility is that if there's a high inflation, then the tangible asset like real estate is a good hedge. If there's a deflation like Japan, awful scenario. And the best scenario will be the last bullet, where you have a much sharper GDP growth, and that will only come from increase in business spending. Huge job creation, release of the pent-up demand to the marketplace. My last slide. I believe we are entering a virtuous cycle. Home values stabilize. They will minimize future foreclosures. Minimizing future foreclosure means further stabilization of home values. Further stabilization of home values means consumers feel confident they enter the market. So all the positive feedback continue to occur. And I think we are beginning to enter this stage. But the awful, ugly scenario is if home values was to fall meaningfully, and this would be the Alan Greenspan scenario, if it was to happen, expect another recession, expect another 2, 3, or 4 million job losses, and you just don't want to think about it. So thank you very much.